Okay, next up on the 10 years later agenda, Battlestar Galactica. This being the Blu-ray that has the original movie version of the pilot, and then this being the whole series in full screen, obviously, because that's how you're supposed to see it. And, whoa, I was not expecting to like this show as much as I did when I watched it like 2.5 years ago. Oh, but yeah, I'm really glad that I did this now. I see what a lot of people hype it up about, and to my pleasant surprise, it didn't end on a true cliffhanger. Not everything is wrapped up, but it's wrapped up enough. But yeah, the premise of this thing, it promotes a darker sci-fi thing, which I don't think was as common at the time. I could be wrong. I don't really know much about the gradual development and matureness of fictional media, so to speak, because, there's just too much out there to really discuss. But you compare that to Star Trek and Star Wars, which are the best things, or at least the most obvious things to compare it to. It's both continuity oriented and a more serious thing. That's not to say that there weren't bits of humor in there, but it had to do more with the scene rather than the setting, like Star Trek original series was, which is the one Star Trek show that I've seen all the way through. And also, it was nice to see how this franchise tried to develop a good amount of characters in there. It wasn't the craziest list of characters, and there were problems with that development, which I'll get to later, but I admire it for trying. There were plenty of simple things that I did enjoy, because I've got a DVD of one of the Comic-Cons for Battlestar Galactica, this version specifically, and Glenn Larson makes a point in one of them that the reason that there's a lot of jargon in this show is because he doesn't quote people traveling through another galaxy and yet throwing out terms that make it seem like they're just walking down in Detroit, Michigan, someplace. So I do admire all the little bits that he tried to do in order to, personalize this universe. But the problem was some of that jargon didn't translate so well because Centon, they use that very interchangeably. Yeah. I think that they most commonly want you to think of it as like an hour, but it doesn't work all the time if you're truly paying attention. And I know that there were one or other two really small bits that really grated on my nerves, but that's a minor quibble in the grand scheme of things. The real problem with the show is the fact that it just couldn't truly find its identity, even though at the same time, it not being able to find its identity created multiple different types of episodes, all of which I think they did pretty well with. It's just flowing from one type to another that you got problems, because as a decent amount of people know, originally this was supposed to be a series of mini-series or TV movies, which is why the pilot is 3 episodes instead of just 1. But then, as they're getting ready to move on from miniseries 1 to miniseries 2, the show got picked up as like a regular TV series. But the problem was they didn't have the budget available to keep producing episodes of the scale of the 3-part pilot and then the 2-part story arc that occurred right after it. So that's why the show goes from a more epic theme to something that resembles a lot more like Star Trek the original series, where the people go to various planets, such as the planet where that weird species that's like half primate, half human goes through the town every night or every other night, and they have to deal with that. Starbuck getting captured on that prison planet, and maybe even possibly the snow planet, but that was a lot more creative. I'm glad that they did that. But the thing is, as somebody who actually liked, again, Star Trek the original series more than he was expecting, like with this show, I didn't mind seeing that. I felt that they copied the format pretty well and did the best with what they had to work with, but it was nice when they moved on from that phase to go to a more continuity-oriented bit, bringing back the Cylons to the forefront and trying to continue that. But it's a bummer that they weren't ever able to truly finish, because they do obviously get an ending to the Earth storyline, but like explaining how much the religion bit tied into either the humans or the Cylons, they didn't do the best job of that, unfortunately, but part of that was because the show was struggling to find itself, test the waters. Things that end up testing the waters for like a specific genre or a specific advancement of a genre will, I think, be viewed as rough in the moment, but then applauded later. Can't really speak to too much of that. I'm only in my 30s, unfortunately, so yeah. I've only just gotten to the point where you could say that you've gone from one era of cultural behavior into another. But that second one is still developing. And then the other big issue with the show is, of course, how the core group of characters changes, both in terms of who is part of that group and their behavior, because the beginning of this show obviously establishes that there's supposed to be a love triangle between Starbuck, that prostitute girl whose name I really want to remember, but I just can't at the moment, unfortunately, and then Maren Jensen's character, Apollo's sister and Adama's daughter. But over time, that element gets pushed into the background, even though Starbuck hangs out with Cassiopeia, I think it is. I'm really close, if not exactly. And then once you introduce the Lloyd Bridges character, and then establish that Cassiopeia is actually his daughter, they elevated her up at the sacrifice of Maren Jensen, who then just disappears like 2/3 of the way through this thing, which is unfortunate, because they really could have fleshed that out and had it be an interesting storyline, and instead, as of the pilot, it really sucked, unfortunately. And yes, I'm not a fan of love triangles, but I really would have wanted to have seen it play out, even though I would have been tearing what hair I've got left out, probably. And then, at the same time, when Pegasus is introduced, you have that female pilot who had apparently encountered Apollo before the destruction of the 12 colonies. I swear that there was a very subtle line in there that indicated that they had met one time before. Bringing her in there and then over time developing her to be Apollo's love interest, well, it did make sense because, one, she was the only other really prominent female, and back then, females, even when they're part of the supporting cast, you just didn't have that many of them. It's a sad fact, unfortunately, but then also just a couple of subtle things, such as when Apollo is in like a state of unconsciousness due to the first time that they encounter those religious or spiritual beings. You know, when they're in that white area, and then I think at least Apollo changes his uniform. Well, there were just little subtle things that she did there that indicated that she might be developing feelings for Apollo. Now, that second one that I said could easily be mistaken as her just caring for a colleague friend. It's perfectly possible. But bringing her in there and then having to speed it up, unfortunately, because of the show getting canceled, I like what they did, but it could have been so much more because Richard Hatch had pretty darn good chemistry with the chick that he had feelings for at the beginning of the show. She's the chick that plays Solitaire and the third James Bond actors. Something more. I don't know why I'm breaking on it. Roger Moore! Oh god, I am just a fail today. I apologize, but it's Wednesday. I gotta get this video out today. Right. He had great chemistry with both her and that female pilot that gets introduced when the Pegasus bit occurs. So, again, this show had tons to work with. It just never was able to realize its true potential, which is really unfortunate because everything that they tried, I think that they succeeded at, minus this, because, so, the first time I watched the pilot, okay, while I was doing my watch of this series, okay, I watched this cut of the pilot, which is the longer one and the one that most people consider to be the definitive cut. Okay, and I greatly enjoyed it, although I definitely saw some of that pilot on VHS. Maybe it was this version, and in that one you had Starbuck without his shirt, whereas in these Blu-rays he's got his shirt on. Now granted, it's just a couple seconds of footage, but it's one of those things that's a bit annoying that they ended up changing it. Because a guy being shirtless, and I'd be willing to wager that we saw him from the back, because if you're going to do him shirtless, you kind of have to have them be actually doing it. So if you have him be on top and then you just see his back, you're seeing a lot less, you know. Yeah, just wanted to point that out. However, this version, oh god, I just hated this version, and it's not because it's shorter, okay? The shortness of it is not the problem. The problem was, I watched both of these things back to back, and I could tell all kinds of shots in this version of the pilot, like with Stallone's director's cut version of Rocky IV, had been trimmed by a few frames in all kinds of places, so the timing just felt wrong in all kinds of situations. And then the removal of Adama and Colonel Tai talking about their contingency plan for when the party is going to be going on, that, honestly, it makes, in my mind, the revelation actually less useful, I guess, because you would think that I'd be saying the exact opposite. It's more of a surprise, but I don't know. Having seen the planning of it and then the executing bit, I'm like, yeah, good job. When I saw it in this version, it was like, because I was trying, you know, to pretend I didn't know about that scene. It just was like, you know. So yeah, I really would not recommend. Oh yeah, and then Baltar and how he gets killed here. Well, here's the thing. based on how the Cylons behave in here, that actually makes way more sense that they would kill him, especially since you have that scene where Starbuck and Apollo in a later episode are captured briefly, and Baltar is in the Imperious leader's seat. How the hell did that fly? But obviously, if you kill off Baltar, how can you really do a convincing job of showing the Cylons? Because owing to the fact that Baltar is just pure evil here, and the Cylons have no other humans amongst them. Right, and even then, the way that they did it was just horribly done, because again, they're trying to show the beginning of the killing bit, and then they just cut away just abruptly. Now, I know that the reason they're doing that is because family friendly. Well, here's the thing. You definitely could have done it in a family friendly way and not have it look kind of bad like that shot was, okay? Now, I can't tell you what it is, but now that I have said that, I'm sure that tons of you are already thinking of ways to do it, so there you go. What? You did it for me. Thank you. Right. So yeah, I would not recommend that cut of the pilot really to anybody. So why do I still have it? I'm a completionist, and it's not the biggest deal, you know. Right. So, yeah, there were some bad things, but these are like overreaching bad things. You have to really watch it in order to pick up those things. If you're watching this like you do with Star Trek, the original series, even though I freely admit I am more likely to watch Star Trek, the original series, again than this, because of these little critique things, I enjoyed this. Really, I see what all the hype is about. This should not be forgotten, and even little things that are cheesy, you know, like the Cylon design. There is something about that design that really appeals to me. Okay? I can't describe it. It's just something that I'm really attracted to, for lack of a better term. Yeah. Oh yeah, and like, you know, that chick that's saying like Viper's ready to launch and all that stuff? Yeah. Just, that was one of the little things about this show that I really enjoyed. Her character does basically nothing, and yet it's just one of those comforting things that you come back to. Well, awesome. Okay, so I'm sorry that I couldn't remember the names of a couple of people in here, but other than that, I think that this turned out to be a pretty nice product, especially with me filming it last minute. Don't worry, the remaining reviews for this franchise are going to have a little bit more thought put into them, because I've actually already watched all parts of this franchise over the last couple of years. I just never talked about it. See ya.